The last sliver of sun hung low over the Utah desert, painting the canyon walls in fading orange as Evan Cole tightened the laces on his trail runners. The evening wind carried a chill, sliding through the red rock corridors like a whisper meant only for him. He stood alone at the trailhead, chest rising slowly, eyes fixed on the distant ridgelines where the maze of canyons snaked into shadow. Running was the one place his mind finally stopped clawing at itself. Deadlines, expectations, the heavy silence of his apartment, everything dissolved the moment his feet hit dirt. He exhaled once, long and shaky, then pressed start on his watch. "One last loop," he muttered, not sure if the words were reassurance or a warning. He sent a quick text to his sister, Maya, "Just finishing a run. Don't wait up." No emoji. No warmth. Just the bare minimum she had already learned to interpret as "I'm okay enough." The first steps always felt like stepping out of his own life. His feet tapped rhythmically across the packed sand, kicking up tiny clouds that drifted behind him. The sandstone walls rose higher with every turn, narrowing the sky into a thin strip of deepening blue. Bats flitted overhead, silent shadows darting between rock and night. Evan pushed harder. He knew this trail too well. The curves, the uneven dips, the silent gullies that caught cold air as soon as the sun dropped. But familiarity didn't comfort him. In fact, the more he ran it, the more he realized how quickly a wrong step could swallow someone whole. He flicked on his headlamp even though some light still lingered. The beam cut through the twilight, illuminating brush, cracked stone, and slabs that had fallen from cliffs long before he was born. The canyon seemed endless tonight, stretching farther than it ever had, like the desert itself was drawing him inward. He didn't notice the first shiver of unease until he rounded the bend near the split in the trail. A gust of wind swept through, cold enough to make him stop for a breath. His pulse drummed in his ears. He wasn't sure why. Maybe the sudden silence. Maybe the way the canyon walls seemed to press closer, stealing the last of the warmth. "Keep going," he told himself. He turned left, the longer loop, the one he used when sleep felt impossible. His shoes tapped lightly over a spill of pebbles. Somewhere in the distance, a bird shrieked once and fell silent. The sound prickled the back of his neck. "Relax," he whispered. Just the usual night sounds. But even he didn't believe that. Running deeper meant running into blind turns carved by wind long before there were people to walk them. Every wall cast shadows that swallowed his headlamp before the beam could reach the ground. The farther he pushed, the more the desert transformed from familiar to unsettling, a place that watched him rather than welcomed him. Still, he kept moving. His breathing grew heavy, mixing with the faint rasp of the wind. Sweat cooled quickly on his skin. The temperature had dropped faster than he expected. He checked his watch, later than he thought. The last hint of daylight faded entirely, replacing the canyon with a hollow, moonlit emptiness. He should have turned back. He knew he should have. But he wanted those last few miles, needed them, to outrun whatever churned inside him. His pace quickened even as his visibility shrank. Rocks shifted beneath his shoes. The landscape blurred into walls and shapes that looked almost alive in the thin light. Another gust of wind rushed through the canyon. This time he heard something inside it, a faint scrape of stone behind him. He spun, lamp beam slicing through the dark. Nothing. "Probably just a hair," he muttered, though his voice trembled slightly. He took off again, but his steps faltered. His mind tugged at him with warning after warning. "Turn around. Something's off. Turn around before." A distant growl rippled through the canyon. He froze. His lamp flickered once, then steadied, illuminating only dust and brush. The sound didn't return, but the silence that followed was heavier than before, thick enough to choke on. He swallowed hard. For the first time in years, running didn't feel like escape. It felt like walking straight into something waiting for him. He didn't know it yet, but this was the last moment anyone saw him alive for the next 4 days. And by morning, Maya would realize something had gone terribly wrong. By the time the sun rose over the quiet streets of St. George, Maya Cole had already checked her phone 6 times. Evan always texted after his runs, even on the nights he returned late, even when he was exhausted, even when they weren't exactly speaking. A single word, a thumbs up, anything. But this morning, Her screen held nothing except the message she sent last night. "Let me know when you're back." She waited. 5 minutes passed. Then 10. Her stomach tightened. Maya walked to the kitchen window, clutching her coffee mug with both hands as if the warmth could steady her. Outside, morning light stretched over the rooftops, soft and peaceful, too peaceful for the dread settling in her chest. "He's fine," she whispered. "He always pushes it. He'll text soon." But Evan didn't push it like this. He was reckless with his emotions, not with his safety. Running was the one thing he treated with religious discipline. She refreshed the screen again. Still nothing. A familiar fear crept into her, one she had tried for years to bury. Evan disappearing into himself wasn't new. But Evan disappearing into the wilderness without resurfacing? That was different. That was dangerous. She dialed him. 1 ring. 2, 3. Voicemail. "Mornin'. This is Evan. Leave." She hung up before he finished. Her breath hitched. The fear sharpened. She tried again. Straight to voicemail. "Okay," she said out loud, forcing herself to breathe through the rising panic. He stayed out too long. Maybe he slept in the car. Maybe there's no signal. She grabbed her keys. The drive toward the trailhead felt endless. The red cliffs loomed in the distance, glowing under the early sun, their beauty doing nothing to ease her anxiety. Every mile she covered made her chest feel tighter. When she finally pulled into the dirt parking area, she found Evan's car parked exactly where it had been the last time they hiked together. Dust coated the windshield. His running jacket still hung from the back seat. "Evan," she called, even though she knew he wasn't nearby. Silence answered her. She checked her phone again, hoping for a miracle. No messages. Maya leaned against the driver's door, pressing her palms to her forehead. She felt a cold, familiar twist of guilt, the guilt of every unsaid sentence, every argument, every moment she thought she had time to repair things. A voice startled her. "You okay, miss?" A middle-aged man in Ranger khaki stepped toward her, adjusting his radio. Ranger Holt, his badge red. His expression was calm but aware, the kind of person who saw trouble long before anyone admitted it. "My brother went for a run last night," Maya said, swallowing hard. "He didn't come home." Holt's eyes shifted to Evan's car, then to the empty trail stretching into the canyon. "When did you last hear from him?" "Just before sunset," she replied. "He said he was finishing one last loop." Holt nodded slowly, calculation tightening his jaw. "This area gets confusing after dark. Easy to lose footing. Easy to pick the wrong turn." Her breath caught. "Do people get lost out here?" "It happens," he said carefully. "But we'll look. Let's start with a call-in to search and rescue." He spoke into his radio, voice steady, practiced. Within minutes, the tone of the quiet morning shifted. An engine started somewhere, boots crunched on gravel, another ranger stepped out of a truck. Maya stood frozen, listening to the first official words that made it real. Possible missing trail runner. Last seen at dusk. Her hands trembled. Holt put a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "We'll find him. First light gives us a good head start." She tried to nod, tried to breathe, but her mind raced with images of dark canyons, freezing nights, and Evan alone. Somewhere out there, her brother needed help. And as the search team gathered beside the trailhead, Maya realized this was only the beginning. Next would come the difficult part, following the paths that held no answers at all. Dawn spread slowly over the sandstone cliffs as the first search teams gathered at the trailhead, their radios crackling in the cool morning air. Maya stood beside Evan's car, arms wrapped tightly around herself, watching the quiet bustle of professionals preparing to enter the wilderness that had swallowed her brother. She barely slept, her mind replaying every second of their last conversation, every sign she might have missed. Ranger Holt approached with a clipboard and an expression that blended firmness with compassion. "We'll start with a grid search heading west," he said. "That's the direction runners usually take this time of day." Maya nodded, though her stomach twisted at the thought of the vast canyons stretching for miles in every direction. The early light seemed fragile, as if one harsh gust could shatter it and plunge everything back into darkness. Searchers tightened straps on their packs, checked radios, tested ropes, and scanned maps spread across the hood of a truck. Each movement was efficient, practiced, but the silence beneath it revealed what everyone feared. Too much time had already passed. Holt motioned her over to the trail entrance. "If you remember anything about his mindset last night, you tell me immediately," he said quietly. Maya hesitated, shame flickering across her face. "He wasn't doing great," she admitted. "He's been struggling. Running helps him clear things out." Holt nodded once, absorbing more than her words, the worry, the exhaustion, the guilt weighing on her. "We'll find him," he repeated, but this time the conviction in his tone carried a hint of urgency. The team set off, boots crunching across gravel as they disappeared into the twisting red earth corridors. Maya trailed behind one group, staying close enough to hear their commentary, far enough not to disturb their work. The desert greeted them with stillness. No birdsong, no breeze, just the faint echo of steps bouncing between massive walls. Holt lifted his radio. "Team 2, check the lower ridge. Team 3, follow the wash north." Static answered before voices confirmed their routes. As they advanced, the landscape shifted subtly, sand giving way to jagged stone, brush thinning into skeletal patches. Maya scanned every shadow, every indentation in the dirt, searching for something, anything, that looked like Evan had passed through. Her breath hitched when she noticed a trail of scuffed sand leading toward a narrow canyon split. "Over here!" she called, voice cracking. Holt hurried to her side, kneeling to inspect the marks. He brushed his fingers over the disturbed sand, eyes narrowing. "Could be from him," he murmured. "But it's not enough. Keep watch for more." They followed the faint signs deeper, the air cooling as the canyon walls tightened around them. The further they walked, the more Maya felt as though the desert were hiding something, holding its breath, waiting. Every step echoed with dread she couldn't shake. Holt glanced toward the narrowing passage ahead, his voice low as he spoke into his radio. "Team 2, converge on our position. We may have a lead." Maya's pulse quickened. Something in Holt's eyes told her this wasn't a routine trail check anymore. They moved into the shadowed split, where sunlight thinned into a pale ribbon overhead. The air felt noticeably colder, and the ground showed strange indentations, dragged earth, scattered pebbles, a faint arc carved into dust. Holt crouched, studying the marks with growing concern. He didn't say anything at first, but the tightening of his jaw said enough. Finally he rose, eyes sweeping the canyon ahead. "Everyone stay alert," he said. "Something moved through here recently." Maya swallowed hard, dread coiling inside her. The realization hit her with chilling clarity. Whatever left those marks wasn't just Evan. And deeper in the canyon, the truth waited for them. Holt lifted his hand, signaling the team to halt as he listened to a faint, distant echo rolling through the canyon, a sound that made every searcher instinctively tighten grip on gear. The canyon still echoed with that distant, unplaceable sound as the search team pushed forward, their steps cautious, radios quiet. Maya stayed close behind Ranger Holt, trying to steady her breathing, but every new shadow carved into the red stone felt like another warning she couldn't interpret. She kept replaying Holt's words, "Something moved through here recently," until they twisted into something larger, darker. Holt crouched again near a cluster of rocks where the narrow passage widened. "There," he said softly, pointing at a faint footprint half swallowed by loose sand. The toe imprint was deep, angled sharply, as if someone stumbled or pivoted hard. Maya's heart jumped. "Is it his?" "Possibly," Holt murmured. "But the sand here shifts fast. Could be from yesterday. Could be earlier." His tone carried uncertainty that felt heavier than a direct answer. Another ranger, Lena, approached from the right side of the trail. "Found a partial tread," she said. "Matches a lightweight running shoe." Maya felt hope bloom painfully inside her chest. Sharp, fragile, almost unbearable. She knelt beside the mark, brushing her fingers near it without touching. It was the closest thing to Evan she'd seen since yesterday. But Holt stood slowly, gaze drifting further along the canyon. "The problem," he said quietly, "is that the tracks scatter." And he was right. Beyond that faint footprint, the ground turned chaotic. Wind-etched swirls, animal scuffs, fallen stones. No pattern, no direction, nothing that looked like a single consistent path. Lena exhaled sharply. Wind picked up last night. Everything's half erased. Maya's hope dimmed. So, you can't follow them? We can follow what we have, Holt said, shoulders tightening, but it may not lead anywhere. They continued deeper, but the land refused to cooperate. Every potential footprint dissolved into nothing. Every indentation seemed to point in two different directions. The canyon forked twice, then again, each split looking identical. Tall red walls, sand-filled basins, dry brush that rattled softly in the breeze. At one junction, Holt paused, scanning the ridgelines above. He wouldn't have gone up there, he muttered. Too steep for a runner without gear. He pivoted toward the narrower route instead, eyes narrowing at something caught on a thorny branch. A scrap of green fabric. Maya's breath hitched. That, Holt, that's his hoodie color. Holt carefully plucked the torn piece free. It's weathered, he said, rubbing the fibers between his fingers. Could have been here a few hours. Could have been pulled last night. How far ahead could he be? Maya asked, throat tight. If he kept moving after dark? Holt shook his head. It depends on his condition. Awareness. Injuries. He hesitated. Or if he wasn't alone. The implication hung like a storm cloud. They kept moving. Hours passed. The sun climbed high, baking the canyon floor. The search widened. Teams fanned out into neighboring corridors, drones buzzed overhead, and radios exchanged location checks. Each time Holt lifted his radio, Maya waited for the word she needed to hear. We found him. But every update came back the same. Nothing. The landscape grew harsher as they pushed into a region of broken boulders and abrupt drop-offs. Holt paused at the edge of one cliff, kneeling to examine a scattering of disturbed sand. This is strange, he murmured. Something slid here, but it's not clear what. Lena peered over his shoulder. Could be an animal. Maybe, Holt replied, though doubt crept into his voice. But there's no clear predator track either. Maya stepped closer, staring at the messy, half-erased marks. So what does that mean? It means, Holt said, rising slowly, we're missing something. The canyon seemed to answer with silence, thick, oppressive, stretching endlessly into the maze of red stone. Holt scanned the horizon one last time. We regroup, he decided. We need a new angle. As they turned back toward the trail split, Maya cast one final look into the shadowed ravine ahead, a place that felt colder, darker, almost watchful. Evan was out there somewhere. And whatever happened to him hadn't left a clean trail behind. What waited in the ravine would soon be revealed, but first, Evan would have to wake and face it himself. Cold crept over Evan Cole long before he understood why he was awake. Darkness pressed against him from every direction, thick as cloth, and for a moment he could not tell whether his eyes were open or closed. His body felt heavy, anchored to the uneven ground beneath him. When he tried to move, pain flared along his ribs like a sudden blade. He drew a shallow breath, wincing as the air scraped his throat. The last thing he remembered was running, pushing through the narrowing canyon with the sense that something followed just out of sight. Then the darkness had swallowed him, not gently but with the force of a blow. Now he lay somewhere unfamiliar, the desert night cold enough to sink into his bones. He tried to sit up. The world tilted violently, and he collapsed back onto the sand, clutching his ribs as a low groan escaped him. His mind felt blurred, as if every thought was coated in dust. But one thing cut through the haze: he was not alone out here. Something had dragged him. He could feel it in the way his legs ached, in the strange grooves etched into the ground beneath him. He strained to listen. The desert usually hummed with tiny sounds: crickets, wind brushing against stone, the distant rush of nocturnal life. Tonight felt different. Too still. Too watchful. He swallowed hard, tasting dirt and copper. Every instinct screamed that he needed to move, needed to get out of whatever hollow he had landed in, but the darkness pressed so thickly around him that he could barely tell which direction led upward. He forced himself onto his elbows. The movement made his vision spark white, but eventually shapes emerged from the murk: slanted canyon walls, jagged rocks, and the faint suggestion of a drag path etched through the sand. His stomach lurched. A memory flickered, a growl, low and resonant, vibrating through the stone. He had tried to run. Something had reached him first. He pressed a trembling hand to the ground. The sand there was disturbed, swept in a direction away from where he lay. Whatever had pulled him had strength, far more than any human. He felt the pulse of fear throb up his spine. The desert was not supposed to feel alive in this way, not supposed to breathe against his neck like a creature hovering just beyond the edge of sight. He forced a breath. "Get up," he whispered, though his voice was barely sound at all. "Just get up." The words were meant to anchor him, to pull him back from the rising tide of panic. Slowly, inch by inch, he pushed himself upright until he was sitting against the sloped canyon wall. The cold seeped through his clothes, draining what little strength remained. A faint rustle drifted from somewhere above him. His breath hitched. He scanned the jagged ledges, searching for movement, but saw only darkness layered over more darkness. Still, he sensed something there, waiting, deciding. The knowledge chilled him deeper than the night air. If the creature returned, he would have no strength to fight. Maybe no strength to even scream. He closed his eyes for a moment, fighting dizziness. Images flashed behind his eyelids: Maya's worried face, the warm light of his apartment, the text he never answered. Regret twisted painfully inside his chest. He hadn't meant to vanish on her. He hadn't meant for any of this. A cold gust swept over him, carrying sand that stung his skin and jolted him back to awareness. He forced himself to look toward the darkness ahead, searching for even the faintest landmark that might guide him upward. The canyon walls loomed like giant shadows, offering no comfort, only a reminder of how trapped he was. Somewhere beyond these twisting corridors, search teams would be waking with the first light, preparing to look for him. He clung to that thought, fragile but real. If he could stay awake, if he could hold on a little longer, someone might find him. But as another tremor of pain shook his body, he realized nightfall had only begun, and surviving it would take everything he had left. He whispered into the dark. The desert night pressed in heavier than the cold itself, swallowing every trace of warmth left from the fading sun. The search team kept their headlamps low, following the faint scuffs they believed belonged to him, yet each step felt more uncertain than the last. The wind carried strange sounds, low, scraping breaths that didn't belong to any of them. Ranger Collins raised a hand, signaling a stop. "Hear that?" he whispered. The group stiffened. Another sound drifted through the dark, slow, deliberate crunches circling just beyond the edge of their lights. Something was moving with intention. A beam swept sideways, catching two reflections, round, unblinking, too high off the ground to be a coyote. The eyes vanished instantly, as if whatever owned them understood light. "Keep close," Collins murmured, though even he sounded unsure. The tracks ahead blurred into loose sand, and something large shifted again in the black. Whatever followed them wasn't finished yet. For the next 4 days, the desert remained eerily quiet, as if whatever stalked them that night had sunk back into the dunes to watch. The search team pushed on at dawn and retreated at dusk, each day ending with fewer answers and more frayed nerves. Radios crackled with static, drones lost signal over the ridges, and every promising lead dissolved into sand. Family and volunteers gathered at the base camp, their voices subdued, waiting for news that never came. His mother asked the same question each morning: "Did you find anything?" And each time, Collins could only shake his head. By the 4th evening, the silence felt deliberate, almost orchestrated. Even the usual desert wildlife had vanished, leaving only wind and emptiness. Then, just as the sun dipped behind the last ridge, a call came through the radio. Broken, urgent, impossible. Someone had found something. The radio transmission was faint, nearly swallowed by static, but the urgency in the caller's tone cut through every crackle. Collins froze mid-step, his hand instinctively tightening around the radio. "Repeat that," he demanded. "Say again." The reply came in fragments. "Found something? North Gulch. Looks like a drag," before dissolving into white noise. That was enough. Within minutes, the entire search team was moving, headlights bouncing across the rugged terrain as they drove toward the northern gulch, a remote cut of sandstone and loose shale they had searched only in passing. It was the kind of unforgiving terrain where hikers rarely wandered, and where predators thrived undisturbed. As the team approached the site, the air felt different, heavier, charged with a tension none of them voiced. A ranger flagged them down, flashlight in hand, his face unusually pale beneath the brim of his hat. Without a word, he led them up a narrow incline. And then they saw it. A long, deep groove carved into the dirt, beginning at the base of a rock shelf and trailing downhill for nearly 30 yards. The soil was disturbed, scattered in uneven waves as though something heavy had been pulled through it. Branches were snapped, brush flattened, and ragged tufts of fabric clung to thorn shrubs along the path. The desert itself seemed to hold its breath. Elena arrived seconds later, stumbling as she ran. Collins steadied her, but her eyes were locked on the mark gouged into the earth. "Is that—" She couldn't finish the sentence. "It could be animal," Collins said carefully, though he didn't believe it. Cougar drag marks were usually shorter, less chaotic. This one was wild, erratic, a pattern that spoke of desperation. He crouched close, examining the edges. The soil bore faint impressions, partial, smudged, but unmistakably human. Fingertips. Someone had fought against being pulled. The discovery had a chilling effect on the team. Even the most seasoned searchers exchanged uneasy glances. Animals didn't normally drag prey this far. And humans didn't survive being dragged at all. Still, Elena refused to consider the worst. "If he fought," she whispered, "it means he was still alive." Her voice trembled, but her resolve didn't. The drag trail led deeper into the gulch, its path widening as though whatever had been pulling him had adjusted its grip or changed direction. The team followed slowly, carefully, documenting every inch. The silence was suffocating, broken only by the crunch of gravel beneath boots and the distant whistle of wind weaving through the canyon's throat. Halfway down, they found another sign, darker, smaller, but devastating. A smear of dried blood on a slab of sandstone. It wasn't much, but it was enough to confirm the violence of whatever happened here. Collins closed his eyes briefly, steadying himself. But then something shifted. The drag mark narrowed, almost straightened, and the disturbed soil grew lighter, as though the weight being pulled had lessened. And near the end, beside a cluster of sagebrush, they saw a single print pressed deeply into the earth, a footprint. A man's footprint. Fresh enough that the edges hadn't yet crumbled. "He stood here," a ranger murmured. He stood. On his own. A flicker of hope rippled through the group. And just beyond that final footprint, the drag trail ended, abruptly, and vanished into tangled brush that looked deliberately disturbed. Something, or someone, had gone deeper. And whatever waited there would change everything. For a long moment, no one spoke. The final footprint stared back at them like a frozen echo, a silent announcement that Jack had not only been alive at that point, he had been standing. Collins knelt beside it, brushing the loose dust away with a gloved hand. The shape was sharp, the edges bold, untouched by the shifting desert wind. "This is recent," he said quietly. "Hours. Maybe less." Elena pressed a trembling hand against her mouth. Color drained from her face, but hope flickered in her eyes with a fragile, urgent glow. "Then he's close," she whispered. "He has to be." The brush ahead was dense, twisted branches, tightly woven sage, and thick undergrowth rarely disturbed by people. Something had pushed through with force, leaving a narrow gap in the vegetation. Not wide enough for a cougar dragging prey. Not wide enough for someone unconscious. But wide enough for a struggling, half-conscious man forcing his way through. Collins lifted a hand. "Flashlights off. Move slow. No shouting. If he's injured or hiding, we don't want to scare him or a predator." The team nodded, urgency sharpening every breath. They slipped forward, one by one, the world shrinking to the faint rustle of brush and the muted crunch of footsteps against dry earth. The canyon walls seemed to close in, shadows deepening into narrow channels that hid anything, or anyone, within them. A soft sound drifted through the darkness. Faint. Fragile. Elena stopped instantly. Did you hear that? Collins raised a fist. Halt. Everyone froze. The silence stretched, thick and oppressive. Then, again, a low exhale. A rasp. Like someone dragging in air through pain-tightened lungs. It came from behind a cluster of boulders wedged at the canyon base. Collins whispered, "Jack." No answer. Just another weak, ragged breath. They crept closer. The air cooled noticeably, shadows pooling like ink around the stones. When Collins circled the largest boulder, his flashlight, kept low to avoid blinding anyone, caught a shape on the ground. A body. Thin. Dirt-covered. Phil. Elena fell to her knees beside him before Collins could finish saying her name. "Jack," she choked out. "Jack, look at me." For a terrifying second, there was no movement. The only sign of life was the shallow rise of his chest, barely lifting beneath the shredded fabric of his shirt. His skin was pale beneath layers of dust, lips cracked, arms scraped to raw red lines. One leg was twisted at an unnatural angle, swollen badly below the knee. But then, slowly, his eyelids fluttered. Elena leaned closer, tears streaking down her face. "Jack, it's me. You're okay now. We found you." His voice emerged as the faintest whisper, brittle as dried grass. "Don't let it come back." Elena stiffened. What are you talking about?" Jack swallowed with visible effort, every movement stiff with pain. "Cougar followed me, nights, watching." Collins scanned the shadows instantly, pulse spiking. The canyon was silent, but the kind of silence that felt aware, alert. He gestured for the team to form a perimeter. Jack clutched at Elena's wrist weakly, his hand shaking. "I tried to climb, slipped, couldn't move." His breath hitched. "It dragged me, but I got away. I hid, waited." His voice faded, but his fear lingered in the air like a warning carved in stone. Collins spoke softly but firmly. "We need to extract him now. This place isn't safe." Elena nodded, brushing Jack's hair back gently. He sagged toward her voice, clinging to the comfort. As they lifted him onto the stretcher, a low growl echoed faintly from somewhere deeper in the canyon. Soft, distant, but unmistakably real. Everyone froze. And the rescue became a race against whatever shared the shadows with them. The growl faded into the canyon, but its echo clung to the walls like a warning none of them could ignore. Collins signaled the team to move, urgency tightening his voice into a whisper. "Go." Slow, steady, no noise unless necessary. The rescuers formed a tight protective circle around Jack's stretcher, flashlights kept low, beams skimming the ground as they navigated the jagged terrain. Every step felt like it might shatter the fragile silence. Elena held onto the stretcher's side, refusing to let go even when her legs trembled. Jack drifted in and out of consciousness, his breathing shallow, his face pale beneath streaks of dirt. Each time his eyes fluttered open, panic flickered through them, panic that something still hunted him. "Jack," she whispered, leaning close. "We've got you. You're safe. Stay with me." He exhaled shakily. "Don't stop." They didn't. But the canyon made escape punishing. Loose rocks slid beneath their boots. The wind shifted unpredictably, tugging at branches and shaking shadows across the walls. Every distant rustle sounded like movement. Every echo felt alive. Collins checked the perimeter constantly, his hand resting on the tranquilizer rifle slung across his chest. He wasn't eager to use it. Cougars rarely attacked groups. But Jack's injuries told a different story, one of a desperate animal pushed by hunger or instinct into something unnatural. Halfway up the narrow ridge, Jack stirred again, gripping Elena's sleeve with surprising strength. "It followed me," he rasped. "All night, every night. Circling. Waiting." Elena swallowed hard. "You're safe now. Just stay awake, okay?" But Jack's gaze slid past her, toward the darkness behind them. "It's still here." A low crack sounded from the brush below. The team stopped instantly. Collins raised his fist. "Freeze." Seconds stretched unbearably long. Then another sound. Soft soil shifting, slow, deliberate. The rescuers tightened their formation. A shadow moved between the rocks. Large. Fluid. Watching. Collins hissed, "Keep moving. Don't run. Stay together." They pushed upward, step by step, every motion cautious but urgent. The shadow tracked them, never rushing, never revealing itself fully, just moving parallel, its presence unmistakable, predatory, patient. Jack's breathing turned ragged. "Don't let it get me," he murmured, eyes glassy with fever and fear. "Please." Elena squeezed his hand. "It won't. I promise." The canyon mouth, where the ridge opened into wider terrain, was only a few minutes ahead. A helicopter waited on standby beyond the rise. Safety was close enough to touch. But the Cougar sensed the shift. A sudden growl rolled through the stones, louder this time, vibrating through the ground. The team whipped around, flashlights snapping upward as the animal emerged briefly from the shadows, golden eyes gleaming, muscles coiled. Collins lifted the tranquilizer rifle. "Keep going," he ordered through clenched teeth. The Cougar stalked forward, low, ears flat, tail twitching in agitation. Elena felt Jack tense beneath the blankets. His whisper trembled. "It remembers me." Collins exhaled slowly, took aim, and fired. The dart struck the Cougar's shoulder. It leapt back, snarling, retreating into the shadows with a furious echo. "Move!" Collins shouted. The team surged up the ridge, reaching the canyon mouth as the last growl faded entirely. But Jack was slipping fast, consciousness fading, breath weakening, body collapsing into stillness. And they all knew the fight to stay alive wasn't over yet. The helicopter blades thundered above the ridge, whipping dust into the air as the rescue team broke through the final stretch of scrub. The moment they reached open ground, medics rushed forward, pulling the stretcher toward the aircraft with practiced urgency. Elena stayed beside Jack, refusing to let the desert be the last thing he saw if he slipped away again. Jack's eyes fluttered weakly, barely slits now. His breathing came in thin, rattling threads that made her chest tighten with fear. "Stay with me," she whispered, brushing dirt from his cheek. "You made it out of that canyon. You just have to make it out of this part too." Jack's lips moved, but no sound escaped. His fingers twitched against hers, then loosened as his strength faltered. "He's crashing," one medic shouted. "Get him on board, now." They lifted him into the helicopter, securing him beneath sterile lights and bags of saline already dripping into thin tubes. Elena climbed in without waiting for permission, her clothes streaked with dust, her hair still carrying the scent of the canyon's cold shadows. Collins followed, breath tight, eyes sweeping the ridgeline to ensure the Cougar wasn't anywhere near. Only silence watched them now. The helicopter lifted with a violent rush of wind. Below them, the canyon shrank into a maze of twisting stone and dark ravines, beautiful, ancient, and merciless. Elena stared down at it, her voice trembling as she spoke to no one in particular. "It almost took him. I thought he was gone." Collins placed a steady hand on her shoulder. "But it didn't. He held on. 4 days out there, most people wouldn't have survived one." Elena nodded, but her eyes remained locked on Jack. His chest rose and fell unevenly, each breath looking borrowed. The medic monitoring his pulse looked tense, lips pressed into a thin, unreadable line. Minutes stretched in agonizing silence. Then Jack's body jerked slightly, caught between consciousness and collapse. His head turned toward the sound of the rotor blades, eyes barely opening. Elena leaned closer, tears gathering again. "Jack," she whispered, "can you hear me?" A faint exhale answered her. His voice, hoarse and broken, slipped through like a fragile memory. "You found me." Emotion tore through her. "I'd never stop looking," she said. "Not ever." His lashes trembled as though he wanted to close his eyes again, to give in to the exhaustion dragging him under. Elena shook her head urgently. "No, no, stay awake. The hospital's close. You're safe." The medic nodded. "He's stabilizing. Weak, but holding. Keep talking to him. So she did. She talked about the life waiting for him outside the canyon, the warmth of their apartment, the running shoes still by the door, the trail races he hadn't stopped dreaming about. Each sentence pulled him a little further from the edge. When they touched down at the hospital, a team was already waiting. Jack was rushed through the doors, disappearing behind curtains and bright lights. Elena stopped only when a nurse blocked her path gently. "You have to wait here," the nurse said. "He's in good hands, I promise." Those words echoed the canyon rescue, but now there were no shadows, no predators stalking them. Only hope. Hours passed. Collins sat beside her, offering silent support. Finally, a doctor stepped out, fatigue etched into his features but a faint smile softening them. "He's alive," the doctor said. "Severely dehydrated, multiple fractures, muscle damage, but he'll recover." He fought hard. Elena broke, relief flooding through her in uncontrollable waves. "Can I see him?" The doctor nodded. Jack lay pale, bandaged, breathing steadily now. When Elena took his hand, his fingers curled around hers with a faint, determined strength. "You made it," she whispered. Jack blinked slowly, voice soft but certain. "The canyon tried," he murmured. "But it didn't take me." And for the first time in days, she allowed herself to believe it was truly over.